The Bible is a book collection used by Christians, and it's divided into two sections, the Old Testament and the New Testament, sometimes referred to as the Old and the New Covenants. They consist of 27 and 39 books, respectively, with 7 more in the Old Testament of the Catholic version of the Bible. The process of finalizing the Bible took hundreds of years, but still, there were a lot of disagreements about which stories should be added and which should not be. In this episode, I'll be sharing with you 10 surprising stories that did not make it into the Bible. Hey, welcome back FTD Facts family. My name is Leroy Kenton. And now for this video, you want to watch it till the end. Some of these stories are really surprising and you're going to see why some of them, no way that they're going to put that in the Bible. But we start this list off at number 10. We have the story of Enoch. The full story of Enoch did not make it into the Bible. The book of Enoch was able to answer a couple of unanswered questions that were left by readers of the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. The first question was about Enoch, who is Noah's great-grandfather. He was said to be such a bro with God that God took him up to heaven rather than allowing him to die. Now, the second big question that was unanswered, well, it has to do with the Nephilim. This mysterious race is said to be the offspring of God's sons and the daughters of men. Now, Enoch says that these sons of God were angels that fell in love with human females and taught them certain forbidden acts like practicing magic, and they gave birth to the Nephilim, who were cannibalistic giants. From there, we look at the Acts of Paul. In the Acts of Paul, Paul tells stories about his friendships with talking lions. Yeah, the Acts of Paul is a genre of apocryphal apostle acts explaining what Jesus' disciples and friends were up to after Jesus went back to heaven. Now, we currently only have fragments of different sections, and these sections includes Paul's interactions with Thecla and the extended story of Paul's martyrdom by Emperor Nero. According to this, when Paul's head was taken off, milk was gushed out instead of blood. Number 8, this story has to do with God saving Tekla. Tekla is a young noblewoman in the story, and she overhears Paul's preaching about chastity, and then she devotes herself to follow his message. Her mother then sentences her to be burnt. Yikes! But God saves her by extinguishing the fire. Now, later, she's stripped of her clothing and thrown in front of beasts to be eaten, but again, she's protected by a fierce lioness. Thecla then decides to get baptized by diving into a tank of man-eating seals. Okay, but once again, God saves Thecla by zapping the seals with lightning. Tekla survived until the age of 90, and surprisingly, she ended up living a very happy life and died happy. Moving on to number 7, Ascension of Isaiah. It consists of Jewish and Christian texts from the 1st century BCE and the 3rd century CE. This tells the story of the martyrdom of the prophet Isaiah by King Manasseh and the tour of Isaiah in the 7 heavens. In the first section, Isaiah is accused of treason by a false prophet who was inspired by a demon by the name of Beliar. The Talmud states that Isaiah spoke the secret name of God, due to which he was swallowed by a tree, but luckily fringes on his clothing stuck out, which helped him get away. But Manasseh ended up capturing him and cut him lengthwise in 2 halves. Now, despite this painful experience, he continues to prophesy against the cruel king until the saw reaches his neck and mouth. Now, the second part explains where Isaiah was taken by various angels through different levels of heaven. Number 6 leads us to the Acts of Peter. In the canonical Acts of the Apostles, Simon Magus has a clash with St. Peter. He is a Samaritan wizard who tries to buy the Holy Ghost powers from the apostles using some money. Now, the apocryphal Acts of Peter expands and led Peter to a series of battles. During the battle, Peter teaches a dog how to talk and then sends him to Simon's house, just to tell him that he is a garbage person. Peter publicly embarrasses Simon when he told everyone that he did not actually breathe life into a dead person, but he was actually playing with the body like a puppet to make it look like it was alive. Halfway in at number 5, did you guys know that Satan has a son? Well, in the Gospel of Bartholomew, the minor apostle Bartholomew is the only one who has the guts to ask God questions about the existence of nature. He asked God why he saw him disappear from the cross during the crucifixion. And God replied saying that, well, he went to hell to do a particular task. The book also claimed that Satan also has a son whose name is Salpsan. Now, number 4 is one of the most surprising, if not the most surprising story in this episode. Okay, some apocryphal texts are so bizarre that they're largely eradicated, right? Now, the Questions of Mary is a dialogue in which Jesus takes Mary Magdalene to a mountainside where he produces a woman from his side, similar to how Eve was formed from Adam. Now, this story then tells that Jesus starts to be intimate with this woman that he created and then eventually eats her. And Mary Magdalene is watching this, completely shocked, and she passes out, she loses her life, but Jesus ends up resurrecting her back to life and telling her that she just has little faith. She does not believe enough. The story at number 3 has to do with Mary and her purity in the infancy. Now, you might know the story of Christmas and everything, but you probably don't know the 2nd century text known as the Infancy Gospel of James, and it tells a version of the story you probably never heard before. The beginning of the book explains the childhood of Mary, and this story tells how she remained a virgin all of her life. But then Joseph decided to marry her. Later, the story goes on to say that both of them were held in a cave, and now we all know the story of Mary who gave birth to Jesus while still being a virgin. But in this case, however, there was a midwife, and she does not believe at all in any virgin birth of any baby whatsoever. Yeah, quite different from the Christmas story that we're used to hearing. Story at number 2 is young Jesus' reign of terror. The canonical Gospels of Luke and Matthew describe Jesus' birth and then a brief episode at the Second Temple when he was 12 years old. But then the Bible, it jumps 30 years later when Jesus begins his ministry. So there's a lot of time that isn't accounted for. But in this story, we get to know what kind of life Jesus led growing up. And it said that young Jesus was very problematic and he did some terrible things. But he often later reversed his bad actions by using magical powers. And we end off this episode at number 1 having to do with the Apocalypse Peter. This is a 2nd century text, and the reason why it did not make it into the Bible was that it was found just completely distasteful by church fathers. This text tells about the vision that was granted to the Apostle Peter by a risen Jesus that enabled him to see visions of heaven and hell. And it tells how beautiful heaven is, but on the other hand, it talks about hell just being a terrible nightmare. A passage of the Apocalypse of Peter found in only one source, the Rainer fragment, which does not include the whole text though, but it says that dead saints, when they look down from heaven and see the torment of the sinners in hell, they could actually go and ask God for mercy, and then these tortured souls could actually be retroactively baptized and then saved and brought to heaven. But that brings us to the end of this episode. This is a look at 10 surprising stories that did not make it into the Bible. Some were just completely surprising. You can clearly see why they didn't make it, while others it's like, I don't know, why wasn't that included? Either way, guys, let me hear your thoughts and comments about any of these stories down below. If you did enjoy this video and you made it this far, don't forget to leave a big thumbs up. And if this is your first time here to FTD Facts, subscribe and ring the bell because we post videos daily like this. So if you enjoyed this one, hopefully you enjoy our future episodes. Join the FTD Facts family, and I'll see you soon.